The night had fallen over Shanghai like a velvet curtain, hiding the city's chaos under a blanket of soft golden lights. To the public, it was just another weekday evening, the bustling streets humming with taxis and late-night diners. But for Wang Yibo and Xiao, this night was anything but ordinary. This was their night, 5 years in the making, celebrating a bond that had survived storms, secrets, and silent promises. The whispers began hours earlier when an anonymous social media account posted a blurry picture of two tall figures entering a black Rolls-Royce Phantom parked discreetly in an underground garage. Fans immediately went into overdrive. The car was traced to a private luxury resort just outside the city, a place where billionaires came to disappear. It was known for its tight security, private villas, and a no-questions-asked policy. No paparazzi had ever made it inside. Tonight, the world would get no proof, only fragments of imagination. The drive was silent but warm. Yibo, dressed in a tailored black suit, kept his eyes on the road, his fingers occasionally drumming on the steering wheel to the rhythm of the soft jazz playing. Xiao sat beside him, in a dark emerald silk shirt that caught the light every time he turned. He held a small velvet box in his hand, but kept it hidden between his palms, his heartbeat quickening at the thought of giving it away. When they arrived at the gated resort, the guards didn't even look twice. The manager himself came out to greet them, ushering them into a private villa overlooking a moonlit lake. The villa was a masterpiece, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a roaring fireplace, and a rooftop garden with a view that stretched endlessly into the night. Inside, the scent of fresh lilies and sandalwood drifted in the air, the kind of detail Yibo had personally requested weeks ago. They hadn't said much yet. That was the thing about them, 5 years together meant they didn't need to fill every silence. Sometimes a glance was enough. Dinner was set under the stars on the rooftop, a single table draped in white silk, candles swaying gently in the night breeze. The chef had flown in from Paris that morning, preparing a 6-course meal paired with rare wines. But halfway through the main course, Yibo pushed his plate aside and simply stared at Xiao. "You know," Yibo said, voice low, "I didn't think we'd make it past the first year." Xiao's eyes softened, though he tried to hide the lump forming in his throat. "Neither did I. But here we are." "Here we are," Yibo repeated, his lips curving into that rare, almost shy smile he reserved for only one person. As the night deepened, they moved inside, the fire crackling against the soft hum of the villa's quiet. Xiao finally pulled out the velvet box. Inside was a watch, sleek, understated, and engraved on the back with 5 words, "For every second with you." Yibo didn't speak immediately. He took the watch, ran his fingers over the engraving, and then reached into his own pocket. Out came a small silver key. "It's for the apartment," Yibo said. Xiao blinked. "What apartment?" "The one I bought last year. I never told you because I was waiting for today. It's ours. No staff. No cameras. No questions. Just us." For a moment, the air between them seemed to thicken with something unspoken. Xiao reached forward and cupped Yibo's face, his thumbs brushing against the faintest shadow of stubble. "You always think you're the quiet one, but you say the loudest things without words." Later, they slipped into the heated infinity pool on the villa's balcony. Steam rose into the cool night air, blurring the edges of the world. The city lights glittered in the distance like 1,000 watchful eyes, but here, there was nothing but the sound of water and their quiet laughter. At one point, Yibo ducked under the water and emerged behind Xiao, wrapping his arms around him from behind. Xiao leaned back into the embrace, feeling the steady rhythm of Yibo's heartbeat against his spine. It was in moments like this, unseen, untouched by the world, that the weight of 5 years settled in. They spoke about everything and nothing, the first time they met on set, the arguments that had seemed huge at the time but now felt small, the countless nights spent apart because of schedules, and the secret messages they'd pass through friends when they couldn't risk being seen together. By the time they returned indoors, it was past midnight. Rain had begun to fall, tapping softly against the glass walls. Xiao curled up on the couch, a blanket around his shoulders, while Yibo poured them both glasses of aged whiskey. The fire cast golden shadows across their faces, making the moment feel like a painting that could never be replicated. "I don't know what the next 5 years will look like," Xiao Zhan said quietly. Yibo handed him a glass. Then we make them look like this. Somewhere deep in the night, a song began to play, an old record Yibo had found in a vintage shop months ago. It wasn't famous, but it was theirs. They slow danced in the living room, no choreography, no cameras, just two silhouettes swaying in the flickering firelight. The world outside would never know the details of this night. Fans would keep speculating, weaving theories from scattered crumbs on the internet. But for Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan, the truth was simple. 5 years ago, they had found something worth protecting at all costs. And tonight, in this secluded haven, they had given themselves the gift of remembering why. Hours later, they fell asleep in the master bedroom, the rain still whispering against the windows. On the nightstand sat the watch and the silver key, side by side, two small symbols of promises that had been made long before they were spoken out loud. In the morning, they would leave before the world woke up. The villa staff would clear away the traces of their stay, and the Rolls-Royce would slip back into the city's veins without anyone noticing. Life would return to its usual rhythm: interviews, schedules, fan meetings, but somewhere in their hearts, this night would live on. Because anniversaries weren't always about grand gestures for the world to see. Sometimes they were about stolen time, quiet spaces, and the kind of love that didn't need to be shouted to be heard. And in that private luxury villa by the lake, Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan had written another chapter of their story, one that would never make the headlines, but would always be the most important one of all. The rain outside had shifted from a soft drizzle to a steady, rhythmic downpour, wrapping the villa in a cocoon of sound. Inside, everything was warm, golden candlelight flickering against glass walls, the faint scent of lilies lingering in the air, and the low hum of an old vinyl track spinning in the background. It was as though the world outside had ceased to exist, leaving only them. Wang Yibo sat on the edge of the couch, one elbow resting casually on his knee as he watched Xiao Zhan with a gaze that could melt steel. Xiao Zhan, draped in a cashmere blanket, held the whiskey glass delicately, his long fingers wrapped around the crystal like it was something precious. Every so often, his eyes would flicker up to meet Yibo's, and every time they did, it was like a silent conversation took place in the space between them. "You're quiet tonight," Xiao Zhan finally said, his voice soft but edged with curiosity. "I'm remembering," Yibo replied, the corner of his lips lifting into the faintest smile. "That first night, 5 years ago. When we both knew, but neither of us said it." The memory hung in the air like smoke. Xiao Zhan's mind instantly flashed back to that evening, how they'd stood on a dimly lit balcony after a long day on set, both pretending to admire the view while stealing glances at each other. He remembered the way Yibo had leaned against the railing, his expression unreadable, and how his own heart had been pounding so loudly he was sure Yibo could hear it. "Some things don't need to be said," Xiao Zhan murmured. "Maybe not," Yibo agreed. "But some things need to be remembered." The rain softened again, as if giving them permission to move. Yibo stood and extended a hand. "Come with me." Xiao Zhan hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking it. Yibo led him through the villa to the rooftop garden, where the city's distant skyline shimmered faintly through the mist. Despite the rain, the rooftop was warm, thanks to the hidden heaters beneath the wooden deck. Tiny fairy lights wound around the edges, casting a soft glow over the scene. "Do you remember this song?" Yibo asked, nodding toward the faint music drifting up from below. Xiao Zhan smiled. "Of course. You played it the first time you drove me somewhere. That ridiculous old car of yours with no air conditioning." "That car had character," Yibo said with mock offense, pulling him close. "Besides, the song was the important part." Without another word, they began to sway to the melody, slow, unhurried, like time itself had decided to bend around them. Yibo's hand rested firmly against the small of Xiao Zhan's back, and Xiao Zhan let his forehead rest lightly against Yibo's shoulder. The rain tapped against the roof, mingling with the music in a perfect, almost cinematic harmony. Halfway through the song, Yibo whispered, 5 years, and I still feel like I'm meeting you for the first time every day." Xiao Zhan closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. He wanted to say something equally poetic, but instead, he simply tightened his hold. Sometimes, the most sincere answers were the ones you didn't give in words. When they finally stepped apart, Yibo guided him toward a small table in the corner of the rooftop. On it was a covered silver tray. "I wasn't sure you'd remember," Yibo said, lifting the lid to reveal a plate of steaming dumplings. Zhan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "You're cooking?" "No," Yibo admitted with a smirk. "But they're from that tiny street stall we went to after shooting ended one night in 2020. I had them deliver it here fresh." The first bite took Zhan back instantly, the scent of street smoke, the sound of vendors calling out orders, and the way they'd laughed that night until their sides hurt. He glanced at Yibo and realized that this was his gift, not something expensive or flashy, but something that brought them back to who they were before the noise of fame. As they ate, lightning briefly illuminated the sky, casting sharp shadows across Yibo's face. It was a fleeting moment, but Zhan caught it, a mix of tenderness and something deeper, something that felt like gratitude. Later, they returned inside. Zhan placed the watch he'd gifted Yibo on the coffee table. Yibo slid it onto his wrist, the metal catching the firelight. "It's perfect," he said simply, and in that tone, Zhan knew he meant far more than the gift. They ended the night stretched out on the couch, the blanket covering them both. Zhan rested against Yibo's chest, feeling the steady rise and fall with each breath. Outside, the rain finally stopped, leaving only the sound of water dripping gently from the rooftop garden above. It was in that quiet, no fireworks, no grand speeches, that they celebrated most. A celebration not of years counted, but of moments kept. Moments like this, where the rest of the world faded away, and it was just them. And though neither said it out loud, they both knew 5 years from now, if they were lucky, they'd be right here again, somewhere hidden, somewhere safe, somewhere that felt like theirs. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more exclusive, dramatic, and deeply emotional stories about your favorite